Good evening, everybody.
Kavod Harav, how are you?
Thank you, Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem.
Okay. Okay, so we're starting with Hey. Read the tour. Ben Ir. Okay. Yeah, so it says like this in the tour. Ben Ir shalach lekach, or ben krach shalach le'ir. If you have, right, somebody, a city dweller, who went to a town dweller that went to a walled city, or the opposite way around. Im ki shalach hayad dato lashuv lebeto. If his intention was, right, when he went there, that he wanted to return home, Belel Yudal, on the night of Yudal, 14th of Adar, Kodem Shior Ayom, before dawn, right? Before dawn comes, Korek Kibnei Mekomo, so he reads like the people of his town, Af Im Nitakev Sham, even if he stayed there, Ve'im En Dato Lashuv, but if his intention is not to return, Ad Shior Yom Daled, until the 14th day has already started in the morning, he reads like the people that he went there to visit, whatever. So how does that work? Ben krach shalach le'ir. Right? How does it work that a person who was a walled city dweller, he went to a town which is not walled. So if his intention was to return to his place, Yudaled on the 14th night of the 14th. So he's going to read like the people of his place, where he lives. Even though, he was held up there and he wasn't able to go back. But if his intention is to stay there, right? Some of the day of the 14th. Since his intention is to stay there part of the day, of the reading of the Megillah, so then what happens is that the time for the obligation to read already takes effect on him. So he should read with them. So now, right, the other way around. Also, if a person who lives in a town, and he went to a walled city, if his intention is to return home on the night of the 14th, before the day comes, so then he's going to read like the people of his place. But if his intention was to stay there some of the day of the 14th, since his intention was not to return to his place, Bisman Chobat Anashim Mekomo Nistalek Me'alav Chobat, at the time of the obligation of the people over there, right? Then what happens is that obligation is removed from him, he says. Kiat Anshem Mekomo, the place where he is, where he lives. So therefore he's considered to be like he dwells in the place where he's visiting. Okay, right? And that he now it obligates him to read together with them. He's obligated. Okay, that's the end of the tour. Let's see the Bet Yosef here. So this is one of the more complicated issues, right? When it comes to Purim, this issue. So what are we talking about here, right? Just before we start the Bet Yosef, just to fill you in, right? We're talking about again, right? To recount the whole thing. Recap. So it says, right, that you have a person who's traveling from one place to another. When is that? On the day of Purim, whatever, or the day before. So what happens is, right, that depends on, what his intention is, to go back to where he was before, or not to go back before the daytime comes, right? This is what it hinges on. So accordingly, the halacha is made. That's pretty much what we were talking about here. So we're talking about a person who's traveling on the day or of Purim or the night before or the day before. That's what we're discussing. Okay, so now we'll start the Bet Yosef to explain a little bit better, right? A little bit deeper this whole thing. If you have any questions, let me know. Okay, so he says in the Bet Yosef, right? The Perek Sheni Megillah. Where is the source for this? In the second Perek of Megillah, Yutet Amud Aleph, Tanan ben Ir Shalach Lekach. Right, it says in the Mishnah that a person who lives in a town, right, unwalled town, went to a place where there's a walled city there. Or the other way around. So the rule is, if he's destined to come back to his place, he's going to read like his place. And if not, he's not going back there. Right? So he reads with the people that he's visiting. That's the Mishnah. Okay, so now, right, getting to the Gemara, it says there, the Gemara, Amarava, Lo shanu ela shatid lachazor belele yudaled. So Rava says this, when does this apply? When he's returning on the night of the 14th, right? Which is the 14th, right, is the time that we read the Megillah in most places. Right? Except the walled cities, as we said, right? From the time of Yoshua, blah, blah, blah. So, right, so if he's going back that night, so what does that mean? As we said, right? Before dawn, right? Before the dawn comes. He's planning to go back. So, yeah. But it says if he's not planning to go back at night, then he reads with them. As it says, Pasuk in the verse. In Esther, it says there, right, so it talks about the Jews that are dwelling in the unwalled towns. So in other words, he asked they ask a question over here, which is that, right, why does the verse have to state, like this issue twice and repeat it again? Like it's telling you unwalled cities and then they dwell in unwalled cities. Well, that I already know. You told me twice. So what's the point of telling me twice? So it says, למכתב היושבים בערי הפרזות, היהודים הפרזים, למה לי, למכתב היושבים בערי הפרזות, כמשמען דפרוז בן יומו נקרא פרוז. So he says, right, it's coming to teach you something there. What is it coming to teach you? That a person who's living just one day in the unwalled town, even though he doesn't live there, just staying there as a guest, whatever, he's considered to be dwelling in that town. So what does that mean? What he wants to say is that, right, if you stayed there during the daytime of the 14th of Adar, so what happens is that you are considered to be dwelling there, even though that's not your place. And therefore, what you're going to do is read together with them where you are. even though you don't live there. Okay. Good. So then he goes on. Um, goes on like this. The Katava Rosh, says the Rosh, right, we're in the third line there. Piresh Rashi, I'm sorry, the Rashi explains the Rava Kai Ben Krach Shalach Le'ir. So he says Rava is talking about a case where the person who lives in a walled city went to a town without walls, right, the open city. So the rule is, right, if he's not going to come back, he's not planning to come back on the night of the 14th, rather he's going to remain in the town there. Ad or hayom, right, until the dawn. So then what happens is that the obligation to read, right, falls on him there, wherever he is. So therefore, he's considered to be the dweller of the unwalled city, even though he lives in a walled city. Okay. So he says, but one, right. So in other words, what that means is that even though he's staying there only for one day, he's considered to be dwelling there. Okay. Good. Let's go on. Right. So it says the same thing applies to a the town dweller, unwalled, that went to a walled city. And he's not coming out of there, right? On the night of the 15th. Shaul kekrach. Shaul kekrach. Keshe'ir hayom. Right? So he's going to stay there when the dawn comes in that walled city. So that's considered to be like he dwells there, even though he doesn't live there really. Right? That means he's going to read on the night of the 15th, and also the day of the 15th. Even if he returns to his town, he's going to read on the day of the 15th, in his town. But if he knows that he's destined to come out, right, on the night, leave there, on the night of the 15th, so then he's going to read on the 14th. Why is that? Because he's not staying there, right, until the dawn comes, so he's not really considered to be dwelling there. Just like the place where he really lives. So he says he didn't want to explain the opinion of Rabbi regarding also a person who lives in an unwalled city that went to a walled city, because it doesn't make sense to say that if he's found, right, if he happens to be in the walled city, right, on the day of the 14th, that now he's, right, obligated to read like the walled city. Then he should stay there, right, on the day of the 15th, and read with them, or even if you will return Leirot to a city, he's going to read on the 15th. Because you still don't have, right, the time has not come yet for the reading of the walled cities. So then he says, why would he be obligated to read like them, right? There's no reason to be obligated. That's according to Rashi. But he says the language of the Talmud, however, implies that Rava is going on the whole thing, matnitin, on the whole Mishnah. So he says, therefore, just like it benefits the city dweller to be like the right the walled city dweller to be like the town dweller. Kishamad sham leil Yudalet. When he stayed there the night of the 14th. Umiktzat hayom, and it's also a little bit of a day. Shehu zman kriyatam, that is the time of the reading. Shel bnei ha'ir, time of the reading of the the city dwellers, the town dwellers. I'm sorry. The chala alav chobat kriyatan. So now, right, he is obligated. The obligation has fallen upon him to read like them. Kemo ken says also same thing, same way. Mo'il leben ir, that it also benefits the city the town dweller shalach lekach, that went to walled city. Ve'amad sham mitzat hayom yudalad, and he still stayed there. Also a little bit of the day of the 14th. Kivan shebezman chiyuv kriyat bnei kamo, since at the time of the obligation of reading of his people, the people of his place, eno imahem, he's not with them. So therefore, right, the obligation of reading like his place of the people has been removed. Right, he's not obligated. So therefore, he's included now with the walled city dwellers. To be liable at the time where they read, when they read. And we call this guy, right, a city dweller for one day. So he says, because he is in the walled city at the time when the people in his town was reading. So therefore, right, he's not obligated anymore to read like the people of his place, who are reading in the 14th. So we call this guy that he's dwelling in an unwalled city for one day, right? He's a dweller. So now, even if he goes back to his town, he's still going to read. I'm sorry, I didn't say it right what I just said. He's going to be called, right, that he dwells in a walled city for one day. That's what I meant to say. So therefore, he says, you shouldn't read like the people who, the place where he lives. Rather, he's going to read B'yom Tetvav. He's going to read on the 15th. Because he's considered to be dwelling there, even though he's only there for one day. Okay, good. So it goes on. Ve'arif katav, says the Rif, lo shanu ela shatid lachazor beled Yudah. That's only if he's destined to return on the 14th, and he takev, and he got held up. Ve'lo chazar, but he didn't come back. So he says, you learn from there, shadavar talui b'mechavanato, that it really depends on his intentions, right? Not actually what he did, but what he wanted to do. From the time that he went out of his house. If his intention was to be at home on the night of the 14th, then it's considered to be like, that's his place, like his place. Right? Even if he got held up, Shama, he got held up there. But he says, if he's not destined, right, or to return on the night of the 14th, then he should read with them. That's the end of the what? The end of 1 second. Let me just see. What are we ending here? Okay. Yeah, so it seems like the Beit Yosef is saying this. Maran Beit Yosef. Okay. All right. So that's good. Go on. So it says like this. Ve'arif katav, says the Rif, lo shanu ela im I'm sorry, we read this already. 1 second. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so it says like this, right? Oh, yeah, okay. So it says, right, אבל אם אינו עתיד לחזור בליל י"ד, קורא עמהם Ad kan lashano, ad kan lashon harosh. So right, so this is all the language of the Rosh. Okay, interesting. So then he go right. So it was the Rosh who said this, not the Bet Yosef. Anyway, goes on. ורבנו עתיד לחזור ורבנו סתם דבריו כדעת הראש. So he says the Rabbeinu, the Tur, right, wrote his opinion like the Rosh, right? No surprise there. ותחילה אמר הדין דרך כלל. So he says, at first he said, right, the law in a general manner, שאם דעתו לחזור בי"ד, that if his intention is to return. On the 14th, that's talking about this case. הכולה מתניתין, it's talking on the whole Mishnah. ואחר כך בא לפרש איך יקאה. And then he comes to explain, right, how does that work? לכל חלוקה וחלוקה. How does the whole, in other words, he gets into the details, right, how everything works. Okay, in a detailed manner. וזהו שכתב, that's what he wrote, כיצד בן כרך. So how does that work? The ben krach, the person who lives in a walled city, shalach le'ir, that he went to a city, etc., etc., so it says, apparently, right, we could have explained, we should have explained whatever, that Rava is going on the first part, Lomar, trying to say that the ben ir shalach lekach, that person who lives in an unwalled city that went to a walled city, Azina Bata Yom Yudal. So then we go according to the 14th, right? Shu Yom Kirat Anshem Mekomo, because that's where the place where he lives, how they read, when they read. Umina Nishma, so it says we learn from there that Ben Krach Shalach Le'ir, that regarding like the person who lives in a walled city that went to an unwalled town, Dazinan Batar Yom Tedva, right? So there we go, like we go according to the 15th. Shawu Yom Kriyat B'nei Mekomo. Why? Because that's where that's the reading of his place, right? He lives in a walled city. Uparuz Ben Yomo. So he says, then what do we call somebody who is considered to be living in an unwalled city for one day? Perush Ben Krach Shebiyom Kriyat B'nei Mekomo Dato Litakev Be'ir. So he says, we're talking about a person who lives in a walled city, and on a day where where the people in his town read, he doesn't want to go back there, right? On that day, he wants to stay in the unwalled city, right? So he says, Mikre Paruz. Right, it's called somebody who lives in an unwalled city. Therefore, he reads on the 14th. It says also, right, a person who's considered to be, what's an explanation? He's considered to be living in a walled city for one day. And the Mishum de Gemara says rather because we say in the Gemara the Paruz ben Yomo Mikre Paruz, that since right a person who's right living in one day, he's considered like a dwelling one day in an unwalled town. It's considered to be like dwelling there. Yalfinan the mukaf ben yomo mikre mukaf. It's the same thing with the other way around, right? If you're living one day in the walled city, it's considered like you live there. Ama mi ben krach shalach le'ir. So it says you see from there that if you have a person who's a walled city dweller and he went to unwalled city, yalfinan leben ir shalach lekach. We learn, right? We learn also regarding the issue of a person who lives in an unwalled city that went to a walled city. So it says, if so, how is it possible that Rava said his words regarding somebody who's living in an unwalled city, shalach lekach, that went to a walled city, and from there you learn regarding a walled city dweller, shalach le'ir, that went to an unwalled city, shmamina de lete lehai perusha. So you see from there, right, that this is not the way to explain it. Be'efshar de mishum hachi. So he says it's possible that because of this, katav Rabbeinu b'tfilat ben ir, that Rabbeinu wrote right in the beginning that a person who lives in an unwalled city, shalach lekach, they went to a walled city, uven krach shalach le'ir, and also the other way around. V'chi ate leperushinhu naktinhu ifcha. Says when he came to explain it, he explained the opposite way. Katav ketzad ben krach shalach le'ir. Right, if he starts first with the other side, from the other side. V'chen ben ir shalach lekach, and also right the person then the first way. goes back to the Klomar, Ikar milta beben krach shalach le'ir ketiv umine yalfinan. So he says, you know what? The bottom line is like this, right? That regarding a person who's a walled city dweller, and he went to an unwalled city, okay? It's written, and from there we learn regarding a person who lives in a unwalled city that went to a walled city, Mishum Hachi, is because of this, Yefshar Lefrushe de Ben Ir. So he says you cannot explain like that a person who lives in an unwalled city, Shalach Lekach, they went to a walled city, Azinan Batar Yom Yudal, that we go according to the 14th, right? That doesn't make any sense. And if a person went from a unwalled city to a walled city, right, we go according to 15th. Deim Ken, if so, he says, Rava Ki Amra, when Rabba said, Lemilte, his statement, his opinion, Al Ben Krach Shalach Le'ir, regarding a person who lives in a walled city that went to an unwalled city, you should have said like this. However, matnitin the aktama ben ir shalach lekach ben krach shalach leir. But he says the Mishnah that went the other way, right, the other direction in terms of the order. Lo kasha midi. That's not difficult. Because we can say orcha demilta naka because he's talking about the general way. What does that mean? What does that mean? General way. So he says, really, the truth is that most of the time, right, the town dwellers are going to the city. You know, more than the right city dwellers are going to the town. Right? You understand that, right? That's pretty obvious because in the city you have more resources, right, over there. So sometimes a town dweller goes into the city because the town that he lives in, some boondocks place. He doesn't have all the resources that he needs there, so he goes to the city in order to get what he's looking for there. I mean, that's the idea, right? That's more common. But what does a city dweller, right, want in the boondocks? You know what I mean? What does he have to do there? He doesn't want nothing there because he's got everything in the city already. So he doesn't need to go there. Okay, interesting, right? Just common sense. But he says from Rava that brings Rashat Kara. He brings the verse, right, which is extrapolated here. Kasher, so difficult. Why? The Efshar Omar says it's possible to say, oh, the ben krach shalach, that when you have a walled city dweller that went to an unwalled city, kol paskim shavimbo. So there, everybody agrees that Azina Batar Yom Yudalet. And everybody agrees that we go according to the 14th. Mishum Hachi says because of this, Naktara Benu Beresha. That's why Rabbeinu, right, brought that in the first case. And then afterwards, Ben Ir Shalach Lakach, the other way around. The Data Rosh, because according to the Rosh, Azina Be Nami Batar Yudalis, because there, according to Rosh, right, even in this case, we go according to the 14th. In other words, where you're located on the 14th. That's what it means to say. Well, if he, okay, let me just see how long this goes. Let's see. Try to finish this, why not? Let's give it a try. Okay. Gavinada. Well, if he Perush Arosh, so it's according to the Rosh, Perush, the Mukaf Ben Yomo, right? When you're talking about somebody who's called a walled city dweller for one day, Have Mukaf, right? It's Lon Dame Le Perush the Paruz Ben Yomo. That doesn't resemble the case of somebody who was considered to be an unwalled city dweller for one day. Have Paruz, why is that? It's not the same thing. Why? The Mukaf Ben Yomo Perusho, because when we're talking about somebody who's in a walled city for one day, it means to say Shiabed Yom Iro. Sheibed Yom Iro, right? That he lost already the day of his town. Sheu Yom Dalet, right? Which is 14th. Why is that? Because his intention was to be held up there on the 14th. Mikre Mukaf. So he's called, right, somebody who's dwelling in the walled town. So therefore, he doesn't have anymore the obligation of the place where he lives. But when it comes to somebody who's considered to be unwalled city dweller for one day, it means that he stayed in the city, right, in the walls. In the unwalled city on the 14th. Because that's the day where they read there. When they read there, so therefore, right, the obligation now has already fallen upon him, taken effect. Kiyat Makom there, according to that place. The Divrei Rambam Stumim. So he says, what about the Rambam, right? The Rosh we explained, right? Even though it's quite confusing what we explained, but we did explain it, right? We did the best we could. Okay, so, right, now he brings the Rambam, right? What does the Rambam hold? Situmim uperushim, right? So he says, upersham harav magid k'divrei Rashi. So, right, he says that the words of the Rambam are not really so clear, unclear, right? In other words, he writes in a very general way, right? Doesn't really define his terms, whatever, right? So, but the Rabbi Magid comes, right, and says that he holds like Rashi. Oh, so we already explained Rashi in the beginning, right? How Rashi holds. The Chen Piresh Haran, and also Ran also seems to go that way. Gam Ken Divrei Arif, the words of the Rif, Shekatav Vezel Shanu, right? This language of the Ran. Lo Shanu Ela Shatid Lachazor Belidal. We only talked about the case where he's going back on the night of the 14th, right? He's returning. Ben Krach Shalach Le'ir. It's going on only the case where the city, like the walled city dweller, went to the town. This is what he means to say. That if he's destined to return to his place, on the 14th, before Shachrit, he doesn't have to read with them. Because right, since he won't be here, right, staying here, B'yom Yudal, on the day of Yudal, on the 14th. Enami afilu nitakev. Says, alternatively, I can tell you that even if he gets held up, kevan nitakev shelo bidato. But since he got held up without his intention, it wasn't his intention to do so. The chen dat harif shekatav. Also, Arif holds like this, that he writes that shenitakev lo chazar. That if he got held up and he didn't return to his town, aval im en dato lechazor. But if his intention is not to return at all, on the night of the 14th, that means that his intention was not to return on the to his place. That night, right? Rather, what he wanted to do was stay here, right? On the 14th, or the night of the 14th. So then what happened was that since he got held up and he never went, right? He reads with them over there on the day of the 14th. Because he's considered to be like dwelling there in the town. But he says if he returned, though, however, if he returned to his place, right, where he lives, on the night of the 15th, right, he should read with them. Interesting. Right? So it looks like he's going to do like a double job here, Go both ways, right? Ugdola mizu amro b'Yerushalmi. He says even more than this. They said in Yerushalmi, ben ir she'akar dirato leil tetvav. So it says like this, right? That a person who dwells in a town, and he traveled on the night of the 15th. Nitchayev kan v'kan. He's obligated in both in both places. Wow. So he's got like a dual obligation here, right? Paruz ben yomo nikra. Paruz mukaf ben yomo nikra. So he says he's considered to be like dwelling in both places. Oh boy. Mukaf, right? Komar, ben ir shalach lakrach. So he says, it means to say that a person who lives in a town that went to a walled city, nameh aminan she'im hayad, that we also say there in a case like that, she'im hayadato belel yudaled lachazor. If his intention was to return on the 14th, the night of the 14th, and come to his place, belel tetvav lo ye naseh on the 15th. I'm sorry. He was not intention to return on the 14th. So then what happens is that on the 15th, lo yeh naseh mukab ben yomo. He's not considered to be the walled city dweller for a day. So therefore he's going to read in that town, wherever he is. Atzma be'yudal on the night of the 14th, v'layla v'yom, and also on the day. Yudaled kim komo, right, like his place. Aval im dato belel daled. But if his intention was on the night of the 14th, right, litakev sham, to return there, leil tetvav on the 15th, uktzat min hayom eno tzarich likrot belel yudaled. Right, so he says that, and also some of the days also staying there, right? In other words, after dawn, he's going to be there still. So there, he doesn't have to read on the night of the 14th, or on the day of the 14th. Kim komo, like his place, ela mamtin ad tetvav. So therefore, what he does is he waits for the 15th till the korei imahem, then he's going to read with them over there, right, in the walled city. So he says it works both ways, you know what I mean? Either way, right? It works like that. Whether you travel to a walled city or you travel to a non-walled town, right? Whatever. When you היינו בליל ט"ו, קצת יום היום, so it says, so yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, so it's a little bit confusing because there are several opinions here going on, you know? So now we'll see in the Shulchan Aruch, right? How do we paskin, you know, practically speaking, right? The halacha. Because there's so many opinions over here, you know, get very confused. This is one of the most confusing, you know, halachot that there are, especially in Purim. You know, this is like one of the more confusing ones. But you know, we'll sort it out now, right? Hopefully, right? Hopefully, yeah. With God's help, we'll sort it out. Okay. So let's see what we can do here. So it says like this, right? Krach shehu safek im hukaf b'im Yoshua. All right, this, yeah. The truth is that yeah, we were supposed to do this last time, you know, but we didn't do the Shulchan Aruch. So we'll do it now. Never too late, right? Never say never. So it says, right, better late than never, whatever it is, right? So it says, right, that krach shehu safek, if you have a walled city and you don't, there's a doubt, right? If it was walled at the time of Yeshua or not. So what do we do, right, in a case like that? There's a doubt. So then we read on the 14th, right? There you go, right? So when there's a doubt, we read on the 14th, right? That's what he says. And also on the 15th, right? So in other words, we do both nights because of the doubt. That's what he's saying. This is what should be done. Interesting. So he says, "Velo yivarech ki im biyud daled." So he says, right, that we're only going to bless on the 14th. Why is that? Because that's the time of the reading of the majority of the world, right? The majority of the world reads on the 14th, right, including all us Americans, right? We all read on the 14th. Nobody here reads on the 15th in America, right? That's for sure. Okay, so that's the way it is. So telling the Shulchan Aruch, right, very simple, right? Again, right, to recap this. If you have a doubt, you're not sure if that city was walled at the time of Yeshua or not, right? We read on both nights, and we blessed only on the first night. That's what he says. Okay, interesting. I'm just going to take a look at the Mishnah Berurah here to see what he says here, because you know, could use a little bit more detail this, in terms of the explanation, right? In terms of understanding it. So let's see what we can find here. You know why I say it needs explanation, by the way? What's, you know what my problem is with this a little bit? The problem is, right, that these laws, you know, of reading the Megillah are from the rabbis. So, you know, why should we be stringent? You know, usually, right, when you have a doubt regarding the rabbinical rules, the rule is that we go lenient. So why over here do we go stringent? That's the question, right? So let's see what the Mishnah Berurah says here. Stuff here. Okay, so I'll tell you what he's saying here, right? Interesting. First of all, he says one thing, right? That Tiberia, right, which is, you know, Tiberias, right? That's what they call it in English. There's a town in the north in Israel called Tiberia, right? It has a nice beach over there, right, on the Kinneret. Right, so over there, it's like a vacation town these days. Very good vacation spot. So anyway, right, he says there that you should read on both nights, right? Uh, because there's a doubt, he says, right, regarding that. That's one thing he says. So Tiberia, he says there's a doubt. That's one thing. And he seems to bring that from the Gemara. Interesting. Okay, very good. So then he says, right? So he says, what about our countries, right? In other words, Europe, right? What's going on with that? If you have a walled city in Europe, right? What do? Do you read on the 15th, 14th, or both? So he says, look what he says, right? That he says we can assume that it wasn't all at the time of Yeshua, because he says most of the towns in Europe are not that old, you know what I mean? Which is true, by the way. So therefore, there's no reason to assume, that there was a wall from time of Yeshua. You know what I mean? Very far-fetched. That's what he's trying to say, right? Okay, that's interesting. That's one thing. Then he says also, let's see what he says here. Another thing he says, right, is that not only we should do the Megillah on both days, but also the other mitzvot. You know what I mean? The Seudah and the Matanot Le'Evyonim, the gifts to the poor. You should do all these things, he says, on both days because of the doubt. Oh, there you go. Okay. Still doesn't answer my question, but let's see. There's one more Mishnah Berurah here. Let's see what he says here. One more Mishnah Berurah. One more for the road. Okay, so he says here. Yeah, so he doesn't really deal with this question, that I'm talking about.
Kavod Harav, how's the example of the city of Tiberia different from the city of Lot? Is that correct?
Yeah, also they were eating 2 nights, the truth is, That's what
It says here, but then I guess the difference would be that on Tiberias they have to do things twice,
Same thing. Lord and Tiberia is the same thing.
Okay.
According to what we're saying over here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But the only question is why, right? That's the question. Because I also, if I remember correctly, I remember seeing the Bet Yosef, when we learned the Bet Yosef on this, that there was an opinion there, that when there's a doubt, we go according to the majority, which is for the 14th. Anyway, what I'll do is, I'll look into it, and then we'll talk about it maybe tomorrow, right? We'll continue on that theme regarding, what the reason is for this. Because right now I'm not 100% sure what the reason is. I have some theories on it, but I'm not going to get into my theories now. But there's one more Shulchan Aruch here, and we'll stop there. So this was the main thing that we did today, right? It says, right, Ben Ir Shalach Lekach. If you have an unwalled city dweller, right, and somebody who lives in a town, he went to a walled city, or Ben Kach Shalach Le'ir, or the other way around. If his intention was to return to his place, but at the time of the reading, but he got held up, right, and he didn't come back. So then what he does, he reads in his place. So again, right, his intention was to return, but he didn't return. So then what we tell him is, since you didn't return, right, read with the people over there where you are. Because why is that? As we said, right, the reason is because you happen to be there in the daytime already, the 14th. So the obligation has fallen upon you to read there, So therefore, you should read. This is the problem. Right? Whatever you want to call it, right? Problem or solution. So, this is a situation, right? That's the halacha. So then he goes on, right? The other way around. But if his intention was not to return, right? Rather only to return after the time of the reading. So then he reads with the people that he happens to be there with them, right? So again, right, let's make sure we got this right. Again, right, we have a case where the town dweller, right, went to the walled city. So depends on his intention, as we said, right? That what? Oh, I'm sorry. He's also saying the other way around as well, right? Or right, the city dweller that went to the town. It's the same thing. So if his intention was to return to his place, Bisman at the time of the reading, he wants to be there. But the problem is he got held up, right? Something held him up right there, and he couldn't, right? There was a snowstorm, right? Something, whatever it was, right? So, we had some snow today, right? Whatever. So yesterday, so right, there was a snowstorm. He couldn't get back, right? So he got held up. So then what happens is he's going to read with the people in his place. So again, right, his intention was to return. He got held up. So therefore, he's going to read wherever he is. That's one scenario, right? The other scenario is that his intention was not to return. So meanwhile, he's going to stay there where he is. Rather, his intention is to return only right after they're going to read, at the time of the reading, right? So then what happens is, right, that since he had no intention whatsoever, right, to go back there, he's going to read with the with the people that he happened to be there with them, wherever he's visiting. So says the Ramah regarding this, right? So he says, what about if he's in a desert, right, somewhere, or in a boat, right? He's on the ship. He's going to read on the 14th. Like he says, the majority of the world, right? Okay, that makes sense, right? Obviously. So yeah, so right, basically, right, just to make it a little bit more clear to you, the bottom line is like this, right? That wherever you happen to be, where the day starts, right, when the dawn comes of the day, where you're supposed to read in the place where you are, if you happen to be there after dawn, you have to read with them. The idea. So again, right, the bottom line is, where are you at dawn? Right, that's wherever you are at that time, you have to read with the people there. So if you didn't go back, and you stayed there with them, wherever you may be, right, in the walled city, unwalled city, you have to read with them. So how does that work, right? For instance, let's say in a case where he went from unwalled town, right? He went to a walled city. Now here's the thing, right? That if he, so the walled cities read on the 15th, right? Not on the 14th. But the problem is that he's there now on the 14th, right? At dawn. Okay. He's there at dawn. And that means that, that he's not going to go back, before dawn to the place where he lives. So therefore, what he's going to do is he's going to read with the people there. What does that mean, read with the people there? He's going to wait till the 15th and read with them on the 15th. Okay, so I hope you're following me. That's pretty much the story, right? More in a nutshell. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll close it up, right? We'll close up shop tonight. Be blessed with wealth, health, happiness. Thanks for coming. We'll see you tomorrow, Bezat Hashem, and we'll continue, right, these happy laws, right, about Purim, which is a happy day, right, the day of our salvation, blah, blah, blah. They say, right, that it's going to be one of the few holidays, right, or whatever, the only holiday, which is going to be even celebrated after Mashiach comes, Purim. All the other holidays are going to be nullified, right? There's not going to be any Yom Kippur anymore, right? No more Yom Kippur. Can you imagine? Yom Kippur? What Yom Kippur? Yom Kippur is finished. When Mashiach comes, right? By the way, don't be surprised. This already happened in history one time. You know why? Because when when Shlomo Melech, right, King Solomon, when he built the temple, right, that year when when they finished it, they ate on Yom Kippur. They didn't keep Yom Kippur. So it already happened then. You know, all the more so it's going to happen when Mashiach comes, right? There you go. Okay, Laila Tov. God bless. All the best.
Kabbalah, thank you so much.
All the best, Laila Tov.